Recently, we produced an episode of Cold Files on the Bob Crane murder mystery. This is what we have learned since our initial investigation. Furthering our research from the books by Robert Graysmith, Bob Crane's oldest son Robert, and the most recent by John Hook. Initially, we wondered if Carpenter had a rental car, why would he need a ride to the airport? Typically, if you rent a car, you do it from the airport and then drop it back off at the airport when you return for your departure. However, we discovered that Carpenter had indeed rented the car from the Sunburst Motel, and he had to return it to the motel on the day of his departure. This is why Crane had planned to take him to the airport. We also learned that the alcohol that was present on the kitchen counter was put there by the Windmill Dinner Theater. The apartment that Bob Crane stayed in was owned and leased by the Windmill, and it was where guest celebrities would stay during the run of whichever show that they were appearing in. Part of the welcoming was they provided some alcoholic beverages for their stars. Although we don't know about the beer in the fridge. The car Bob drove was also leased by the theater as well. John Carpenter was with Bob Crane on the night he died. He did act very suspiciously in the days following his death. He made repeated phone calls to many people, and that did appear to be an attempt of establishing an alibi. According to a witness the day before the murder, a waitress witnessed that what appeared to be an argument between Crane and Carpenter, Crane intensely speaking to Carpenter, and Carpenter looking away. It was learned that John Carpenter did owe Bob Crane $15,000. Crane told his son, Robert, he was going to break off his friendship with Carpenter. Blood was found in Carpenter's rental car that matched Bob's blood type. However, later, discovered in 2017, the DNA matched neither Bob Crane or John Carpenter. Yet Scottsdale Police Department still, in spite of the DNA, believed Carpenter did it. Patricia Olson showed up at Crane's apartment 2 weeks before he was murdered, unannounced. She has time alone in the apartment while Crane is out at the park with their son. Keys to the apartment are missing and never recovered. Crane was in possession of a sex film of her and nude photos which were taken while they were married. The moment she learns of Crane's death, she hires a security firm to prevent Bob's son Robert from returning to his apartment, which was rented by his father. At the time, Robert Crane and his father were living together in the Westwood apartment as Bob was having a house built for himself and his son. But now, Olson owned everything and didn't want any of Crane's family taking anything before she could take inventory. When you think of the death of Bob Crane, this is very much like the Lizzie Borden murders. Who benefits from the murder? The divorce between Crane and Olson was almost finished, and she would have only gained whatever had been agreed upon prior. Him dying before the divorce is final gives her access to everything. The divorce is null and void with his death. She gets his money and estate. What did John Carpenter gain from the death of Bob Crane? Nothing. He lost his job. He was harassed and hounded for the rest of his life and treated like a murderer. And while he may have been the actual killer, it still leaves questions as to the why. A violent murder, like the Crane murder, shows rage. Nothing gets you angrier than someone you once cared for turning on you. Robert Crane stated in his book, the day after he returned to California, Patricia Olson showed up to the apartment making a mental inventory of all that was hers. And Crane asked her, "Why did this happen?" She gave him a cold stare with no tears. "Looks like your father's lifestyle caught up with him." And out the door she went. Robert Crane also stated that there was a missing set of keys to the apartment his dad stayed in. There were 2 sets. One belonged to the Windmill Dinner Theater and the other to Bob. After Patricia Olson made her unannounced visit, the second set disappeared. I think, though, in the final summation of my questions about John Carpenter and Sigrid Valdez, that nags me the most, for her, it's the missing keys. And for Carpenter, once we found out the answer about the rental car mystery is that Bob had planned to take him to the airport, is why didn't Carpenter ever seem concerned that Bob didn't show up to take him? And then we discovered, according to his testimony to Scottsdale Police Department, he called Bob and told him not to worry about taking him to the airport, he'd manage himself. This was his first conversation over the phone with police. He alleged that this call was at 1:30 a.m., but he called back and said that he got the time wrong, and it was more like 2:30 to 2:45 a.m. And this time, the story varies, and he says that Crane told him that he had several appointments and wouldn't be able to take him to the airport. This is a major lie within 15 minutes. Of course, if Carpenter did do it, he'd have to explain why Bob didn't take him to the airport, and it's his word now against a dead man's. Do I believe Carpenter did it? Like any jury looking at the facts, I still have reasonable doubt. Take away the blood evidence in the car and just focus on the things that he claimed. I do think he does make a strong suspect, but so does Sigrid Valdez. She has much more to lose and is far more emotionally invested in Crane than Carpenter, at least on the surface of it all. I don't believe Valdez committed the murder herself. If she did do it, I believe it was a hit made to not look like a hit. But if Carpenter is innocent, everything he has said and done has gone wrong to bolster his innocence. However, having said all of that, in closing, if I had to choose based on everything I've read and researched on this case, I'd have to choose John Carpenter as the killer of Bob Crane.